Okay, Teddy is modeling our finished quilt. Well, it's finished except for the binding. And I don't know if it'll show very well in this, uh, but the edges are anything but straight. I've got lighting that's hard to deal with here, but I don't know, can you see that big dip in the edge there and along there, and certainly along this edge here. Uh, it's a approximately 64 inches square, but it's wavy all along the edges. When I was quilting it, I had to decide, should I try and square it up and make it perfect, or leave it the way it was. And I decided that the original person who made it this way, and I was going to leave it that way. The piecing is all, very irregular. There was a lot of puckering, and it wasn't a flat top by any means. And what I could have done is taken it all apart and pressed it and put it back together to get all the extra puffiness out and everything. But what I did is I worked it out with the hand quilting and just left it the way it was. So my goal was to sort of make this turn out like, even though the top was made about 1900, and I wanted it to turn out the finished product to sort of look like the whole thing was finished at that time, so that my quilting would be maybe something that the original maker would have done. And because the top was irregular, I sort of did my fan quilting in an irregular way. Harder than it sounds to make things not perfect. It's intentionally making the quilting a little wonky. It was a little tough for me, but I think it looks pretty good. The batting is a wool batting. It's Hobbs Tuscany wool, and it has quite a good loft to it, and that extra fullness in the batting helped to fill up the puckers and gave it a lot of nice texture. So that's the top, or the top quilted, and I'll show you how I'm going to bind it. I'm going to do the binding by machine, and so I'll turn off the camera and get to work on that. This quilt has now been trimmed, and I went along the edge and ran a row of zigzag stitching along the edge, and that helps to put the binding on easier for me. I've done it without, but if you've got a zigzag, that makes it easier. And I don't know if you can see this, but this edge is certainly nothing close to straight. So what I'm going to show you is how I'm going to get this bound without making a nice straight edge. Now, most of your quilts, you're probably not going to want to do that. You're probably going to want to have a nice, beautiful straight edge, and square it up and make it perfect. But this quilt was the kind that I wanted to leave it as the original maker of the quilt top in 1900 had made it. So I'm keeping all the wavy weirdness to it. So what I'm going to use is bias binding. Now, I cut this at 2 inches and folded it in half, and I'm going to apply it from the back and then fold it over and sew it on from the front, and it's going to be a pretty narrow binding. Let me get the quilt flipped over, because I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to sew it first from the back and then fold it over, and so I'll get going on that. So there it is, flipped over. The way this is going to work, the the cut edge goes to the outside edge, and the folded edge goes towards the inside. I'm gonna stitch it on close to the edge with a straight stitch. Now, because this quilt is so wonky and weird, I'm going to go pretty slow and really try to get my pressure down here. Really try to get the edge to meet up with the waves in the quilt. So this isn't, if you're doing it this way, this is not a super fast zip through it thing, because you've really got to kind of maneuver around all that variation. And it's just slow and steady, and you got it. Part of the advantage for me of using a treadle is that it's easier for me to go slow. The standard wisdom is always that you should use a walking foot to sew on your binding. I have one and I could do that, but I'm not going to bother. It seems to go fine this way. And so I've gotten to the corner, and I want to stop. You know, that's my seam allowance, or my, and it's actually less than 1/4 of an inch, but I want to stop about that same distance from the end of that. And some people will sew off on a diagonal, and that works, or you can simply do a back stitch there. But the next step, trim that thread off, bring your change your direction, and I bring the binding up this way. So I've got a 45 there, and again, this is so off, the quilt is so off that these corners are going to be hard to make perfect. I don't know if you can see that curve that's there, so it isn't going to be perfect, but this is how you do it. So you bring it up, and then you bring it back down. So this is what it's going to look like here. I'm going to then start my stitch right at the edge, but down a little bit from the top, about the same distance over that I did the last one. So this is the only tricky part, really, is to sort of get that to work out. And of course, you could certainly measure. I'm just not, I guess I'm just not a measuring person. And if I can do anything without pins, then that's usually what I'm going to do. My thread broke. Let me, I don't know why. Yeah. I don't have my magnifying glasses on, so it's harder to rethread it. There we go. Anyway, back to stitching. And again, this quilt is so weird and wonky that I have to get some, I have to slow down some and really try to follow the contours. Now when I get to the next corner, I'll do the same thing as I did at that corner, and I'll do that all the way around, and then I'll come back and show you how to join up the two ends, and then we'll turn it over and stitch it down. So I'm about at the point where I need to think about joining the two halves. So I've got my two ends, and what I do, I'm going to, I've got this section that's not sewed together, so I'm going to trim off a bit part way. And I want to make sure that's pretty square, and I just do this by eye. Now I need some overlap with this piece to that piece, and the overlap only has to be as wide as the binding. So I don't even measure, I use the binding to measure with. So this piece needs to be the width of the binding longer than that piece. So if I lay the two on top of each other, of course you could measure. In this case I would have measured about 2 inches. Anyway, so now I've got the overlap that I need. Now what I need to do is sew those two halves together. Now when you make your binding, you will I got my thread all tangled up there. You know, when you do binding, you would put the two pieces on top of each other and sew from corner to corner, and then that's how it would join. Same thing here. So I need to open them both up, put them together, sew from corner to corner, and that'll be the binding. Of course you don't want to twist it the way I did. So here to here, corner to corner, I'll have to bunch it up a bit so I can get the get this under the needle. It's actually easier if you leave a little bit more unsewed before you get to this point, but this goes pretty easy if you the important thing is try not to have too much tug on that. So you have to kind of ball that up to get it to get these pieces to lay flat. Again, if you're a measuring person, go ahead and measure and draw your appropriate 45-degree mark and all of that to get it to be just right. But I just sort of like to wing it. Does that make sense? So now I would have to trim off this excess. Probably should press that before I sew it down, and that's it. So I'm not going to press it because I'm lazy. So that's the way you join the two ends. Whatever the width of your binding is, that's how much extra you cut for overlap. And sew it corner to corner, and you've got a hidden seam, no measuring, no formulas, no templates, no special anything. Just cut and sew. It's easy. And that's it. Now I'm going to flip the quilt over and sew on the binding from the front. So I'll be right back. Okay, finishing on the front. The binding is sewed to the back. We flip the back up to the front. Here in the corner, you want to bring it out that way, and then this part goes that way, and that gives you a nice corner. I don't know if you can see that, but that's the way it works. And I'm going to top stitch, and so you can see it, I'm using white thread. Probably would be better to use matching thread, but I'm using what I think will show better and what's already in the machine. My thread is caught though. So get under there. And get this stitched from the front, top stitched, super close as you can get it to the edge is what I think looks best. And also is something that is best taken slow and steady, so that you keep it fairly consistent. I don't know if you can see how that's looking. And I hate pinning, so I'm not. If you're a pinning person, it certainly wouldn't hurt to pin it, but particularly with this goofy wavy edge, it seems to work better for me without pins. So let me zip through a bunch of this and I'll show you the finish. Up to the last corner, and then we're done. Just a couple of things to mention. I wanted a narrow binding, so I cut these strips at 2 inches. It would have been easier by a lot if the strips were wider and the binding was a little bit wider. 2.5 inch is actually a pretty good, easy to work with binding width. The other thing is I'm using white thread. I would normally use matching thread, but I thought a contrast would help you to see better what it is that I'm doing. So probably you would use, in this case, a blue thread. Get that one more. Little back stitch. Okay. So that's what the finished binding looks like. My next step is to throw this guy in the washer. This quilt top was made, and you can see the stains. You know, this was made 100 years ago, and it's never been washed, and it's been hanging around in somebody's garage or basement or someplace for. You can see how wavy some spots are. Anyway, it needs a good washing, and then I'll well, then it'll be done. I'll hang it up and let you see the whole thing. But there's the way this looks on the back, and there's the corners. I think it looks pretty good, even with contrasting thread. Of course, you know, again, it would have been better with the matching thread, and probably you'd want to use blue on the top and maybe an off-white on the back to match the backing. But anyway, that's that, and I'll throw this in the wash, give it a wash and a dry, and then I'll hang it up and show you the finished quilt. Well, there it is, finished, and maybe you can see how wavy the edges are. But that's the whole thing, and as you can, like I said, you can see the waviness that I left in those edges, and like I did it on purpose because I thought it was interesting to keep it as the original maker made it. It is still approximately about 64-ish inches square, so it's about a throw sized, and it washed up nice. The fabric held up beautifully. Not every mark came out of it. There's still a few little spots where I can see some staining. For example, I don't know if you can see it here. There's one. But in these old quilt tops that I finish and wash, any spots that don't come out, I refer to from there on as clean dirt. So this is a clean dirt spot on there, and I think it doesn't really detract from the quilt overall. I think it's pretty neat. Just a nice vintage / antique and yet new quilt. So that's that. Happy quilting.